Welcome to Real Talk TV. My name is Darryl Buchannan. Before I do anything, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who supported the show. The first season was great. Learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot with me. Happy to have the second season jumping off today. I'd like to say thank you to Leaving the Street Ministry. You guys support me all the time, and I'd like to give a shout out to you guys. I'd like to give a shout out also to Yard Time Entertainment, my friends out in Boston who's doing big things with the kids, and he has a mental health program for men. I really enjoy that group. Yeah, check that group out. And also, I just like to say, if you like this show, share it, and please subscribe to the channel. Today, I have a special guest. I'm really excited about it. You know, I put out a thing where asking you guys what type of shows you would like me to do, people that you would like me to interview. And this gentleman's name came up a few times in the comments. And so I reached out to him. We kicked it a little bit, and he came through today to kick off the second season. His name is Rob Demeo. He's not only a person in long-term recovery, he's also the outreach coordinator for Sunrise Detox. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, Rob Demeo. Can you tell my people a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, wicked grateful to be here.
We're grateful. I'm grateful to have you, bro. And thanks for coming in. Absolutely. You know, keeping the commitment, and I appreciate that. And just to start off really simple, can you just tell my audience just a little bit about yourself?
So my name's Rob Demeo. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I've been clean for the past 6 years. I do work for Sunrise Detox. We're a private medical detox right in Millbury, Massachusetts. You know, detox is that crucial piece of the treatment process where you come in and, you know, kind of detox and come off of whatever substances you're using. Yeah.
Good. You made a statement. I was on your Facebook, you know, me trolling a little bit.
I saw that, yeah. I seen that.
And you made a statement, and I liked it, but I want you to kind of explain a little bit, man. You said you're an addict for lives that still matter. You said you refuse to stay silent. What does that mean?
Yeah, so for a long time, you know, I ripped and ran through the city of Boston, the North Shore, and you know, there was a stigma out there. There still is, but that stigma was a lot stronger 8, 9 years ago when I was out there ripping and running, where it was really, really hard to get help. There was a lot of shame, embarrassment, guilt, and just ickiness, right? You know, when I had to raise my hand and ask for help. So for me, you know, my recovery since, you know, 2015, I started working in treatment in 2016. I really got to see, you know, how desperate this state was for more resources and more people to kind of speak up and break that silence. And that's what I've kind of been doing. I've kind of been sharing my story to give the next person coming through the doors the hope and the ambition that if I can do it, they can too. Because if a dope fiend like me can pull the needle out of my neck and, you know, stay clean, like anybody can do it. It's just, you know, it's when timing meets opportunity, we get the opportunity to heal, right? So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past, you know, quite a few years now.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, man. I see you, you're doing a lot, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you another question. Is it a disease or a choice?
It's a disease.
It's a disease. Why is that?
It's a disease for me because once I put down the drinks and the drugs, they were just a symptom of something some more severe, and that was myself. And just because I've been clean for 6 years doesn't mean I don't do addict stuff, right? Yeah. If it's not the drugs and the alcohol, it's the women, the casinos, it's the shopping, it's the clothes, it's the compulsive obsession, it's the, you know, the way my brain is wired, right? And it's, you know, it's taken a long time, a lot of years to relearn all the things that my brain was taught, you know, before I was, you know, predisposed to this disease of addiction, right? So it's been a lot of work, and I'm a firm believer that this is a disease rather than a choice. It's my choice whether or not I'm gonna get high or not, but it's not my choice to be obsessing about a breakup, a female, or going to the casino, or, you know, reaching outside of myself to fill that inner void. So cool. That's where I kind of stand.
I appreciate it because a lot of people that I talk to are, they need to just have more willpower, and you need to just do this, and they're making this choice, and I think that feeds the stigma a lot, that people don't understand that, because if we had cancer or we had something else, we'd have some compassion attached to what we have. And it seems like with the disease of addiction, we don't get much compassion. And I think it has lack of understanding. People really don't understand.
We fear things we don't understand, right? Yeah. And that's, you know, what I see with a lot of the families that I work with, you know, that don't understand what the disease of addiction is or why it's a disease. There's a lot of fear, animosity, you know, and resentment that comes around with it. But I also see the breaking point with families that, you know, once they start to understand a little bit that, you know, resentment and those feelings kind of shift to support, love, care, and compassion.
Cool, that's what we're looking for. All right, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? What type of environment were you raised in? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I grew up in Somerville, Mass, right outside of Boston. I came from a single-family household. My mom was, your average Irish Catholic single mom. She did everything and anything for her kid, for me to succeed, to give me the best quality of life I possibly could have. She had left my father, who was an abusive alcoholic, who used to, beat on me on the weekends, beat her before she left him. And, she separated from him, and we moved into this 3-family house, and that's kind of, the way I came up. She did everything she could to keep me off the streets, but the streets were calling, right? As I grew up in like my earlier years, my mom was a single mom, so she had to work a lot. Unfortunately, she couldn't protect me from everything, and that was a creepy neighbor that used to like to touch me when I was a kid, right? And with that being said, I kept all that in myself because I was told that, like, if I, told my mom, we'd be homeless, and there was no father figure or father role in my life, so I felt like I needed to be the man of the house and keep my secrets and not tell anybody. And those feelings that I had to walk around with as a kid, as I got older, made me not really relate to the kids that were my age, right? So I started, gravitating towards an older crowd, and that older crowd was doing things that a kid my age should never be doing, right? And because I had all these feelings because of, all the trauma I had to go through as a kid, having an alcoholic father, being molested, these things, really, once those older kids were, doing all those things I wasn't supposed to be doing, and they put those things in my hand, whether it be, the alcohol, the weed, the ecstasy, it took me outside of myself. I no longer felt different than the kids my age. I no longer felt different than the kids that I was running around with, and I took that feeling and I ran with it, and that was the beginning of me reaching outside myself to fill that inner void to make myself feel content.
Good. And I thank you for saying that. You know what I mean? I too been through that. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
And it's a big thing, that we can say that.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
For years I couldn't say nothing like that, right?
Right.
Because I was always trying to hide because I didn't want people to know that.
Yeah, and all those years that I didn't say it, those are the years I was out there sticking a needle in my
Exactly.
head. You know what I mean? So I see.
No, I appreciate you saying that
absolutely.
because I'm on the Me Too movement with you on that. We talked about that in the men's group that we have. We have a mental health men's group. So yeah, that's big, and I'm glad that men are finally coming out and telling the real raw truth of what happened, right? So when was the first time you used, or a better question is, when's the first time you used and couldn't stop using?
So I think like my using goes back to alcohol. When I was 12 years old, that older crowd, they were drinking and whatnot. So, one was too many, 1,000's never enough. I didn't understand that back then, but they, gave me that bottle of vodka and I drank until I got alcohol poisoning. And my mother had to calm, my mother was like, she was that, Irish Catholic, she was rough, but she also at the same time was loving and caring and stuff like that. She beat my butt, and but here she is with a 12-year-old with alcohol poisoning, right? What do you do? I'm in the hospital for 3 days. I finally come back around, and off and doing it again. I think that was the first time that hey, this kid might have a problem, troubled teen, whatever you want to call it. I think that was the first time that came into play. And then after that, like I said, it was just always constantly anything that made me feel good about myself. I kind of took that and ran with it at that point. As I got older, OxyContin, it was the end of the OxyContin era. They were around.
Yeah.
Never really caught that OxyContin bite, but a lot of my friends were dying from it. I grew up in a town, where we lost a lot of individuals
Somerville,
yeah, opiate addiction and teen suicide. It was more or less, we had more of our funeral clothes out than we did, new school clothes, right? So that was always around. I mean, the ecstasy, the cocaine, I did that for a long time, from, my teenage years, but it really wasn't until 2010 that I really got that opiate bite, that I fully got, like, I had done them, right? But I didn't know what it was like for my body to be fully and completely chemically dependent upon an opiate. In 2010, I was driving up 93, and I was hit by another driver. My truck swerved. My left hand was out the window smoking a cigarette. My truck flipped over, rolled over 3 times, and I ended up in the guardrail. I was med-flighted from, and I wasn't med-flighted, but I was brought from, 93 to Mass General. That car accident that day took my left hand, but the prescription pills the doctors wrote, those prescriptions took my life for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was reconstructive surgery. They wanted to amputate my hand. I went through some crazy reconstructive surgeries. My love handle is actually attached to the top of my hand, and with 13 years later, and I've got most of the motion and most of everything they said I would back, but it didn't come without a price, and that price was fully chemically dependent upon an opiate, which at some point the doctors cut you off, and this was way back when opiate addiction really wasn't something that an orthopedic doctor was really looking into. And when it came time to stop me on those medications, like just because they stopped me doesn't mean I was going to stop. And it went from, you know, the OxyContin to IV heroin use in a matter of, you know, just a simple conversation of saying, we're not going to prescribe to you anymore. And then once I put that needle in my arm, it was off and running. And then, you know, eventually at some point the heroin stopped working, so the crack and the coke and anything and everything kind of was what got me high, and the heroin was what made me feel stable. So your drug of choice
was more?
Everything. Yeah, it was everything. Angel Dust was a big one growing up. You know, that was kind of the one that even every attempt that I made to, you know, most people say alcohol is their, you know, their tough one to give up. Angel, I thought I could smoke a dust bone and recovery and be okay, but that's just not the case. And, you know, it took a lot of years in and out of treatment for me to figure out, you know, which pathway to recovery is going to work for me and how I was going to do this. And I've been successful since.
Good, good. Let me ask you a question. So this is the only disease where we get to decide basically whether we're addict or not. When did you know? I mean, we knew all this happens, or when did you accept it? The fact
I think that the acceptance piece is a hard one, right? So, you know, my story, it was treatment center after treatment center. I reached out to a good friend, Matt Gannum, back, I think it was 2013, 2014, and asked him for help, and he placed me at Dimic Detox. That was my first introduction to a detox, right? He sent me to Dimic. You know what I mean? And we joke about it now, but that was the best call I ever made. Right, I didn't know what a detox was. I didn't know what a CSS was. I didn't know what a partial hospitalization program was. I didn't know what a halfway house was. I didn't know what these words meant. I didn't know what Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, all these different, you know, acronyms and stuff like that. Back then, it wasn't widely talked about like it is today. And I know it's not that long ago. I'm talking like back in the day, but it really wasn't. Right, we have so many amazing people out here right now working, have been working so hard over the years, so people kind of understand and know what these words are. But you know, my first introduction to Dimic Detox, I lasted 3 days, I got kicked out, right? And I'd go back out on a run, and I'd last for a few months, and then I'd make the call to come back in to Dimic Detox. And I've gone to almost all the treatment centers here in Massachusetts that were, you know, state funded. I built some amazing relationships with the staff members in these treatment centers, became a program all-star. And, you know, it was kicked out of them all for all sorts of stupid different reasons, and, you know, I just know the runs started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I used to be able to go out there and run for a couple months. And they started going from a couple months to a couple weeks, from a couple weeks to a couple days. But the one thing that didn't change was how the runs ended. And they always ended in handcuffs and overdoses. And I remember that last call I made to Dimic Detox in 2015, like, something was different. I was like an emotionally broken at this point. Like, I didn't walk to that detox. I crawled. It was the longest crawl of my life. And I know at that point, all the doors were closed. All the locks were changed. My phone number was blocked. I had nobody and anyone. I had nothing. And, you know, I went into that detox. I got down in room 8, and I prayed for everything that I have in my life today. And I think that was the first time that I kind of, I believe that was my process. I needed to go to all those treatment centers. I needed to meet all these people. I needed to take little tidbits of information from each and every one of these people, because when I got down in room 8 in 2015, kind of painted a bigger picture. I was able to see which direction and what I needed to do, right? Because as like they tell me that when you go into these places, you can either learn what to do or what not to do, right? And I learned by not to do, you know? And now at this point, like, I had a pretty good picture and idea of what I needed to do, and I know the only person that was going to do it was myself. And this whole recovery process took work, and I had to put the work in. And so I started doing that. I signed up to go over to the, you know, the 1-year residential program, the John Flowers house over there at the Dimic campus, and I did. You know, I walked out of that, you know, that whole treatment experience with a job working in treatment, which I had no business working at treatment, you know, 8 months clean. I'll be the first person to tell you that. It was something I fell into. It wasn't something that I was out there searching for. If I had my choice, I would have been a plumber, right? But it set off a course of events for my life that I never thought I would, you know, ever be involved in. And it brought people into my life that I never thought I'd be around or even know. And it's been the biggest blessing to watch somebody come through the doors of treatment like I did, battered, beaten, and broken, and walk out empowered, happy, and start to get some of the things back in their life that they never thought they'd have, just like I did. Yeah. So it's been a wild ride.
It's been a while, yeah. Let me ask you another question. Before I get a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about Sunrise Detox. We did talk a little, me and you was
Yeah.
having a conversation. Can you talk and explain to the audience a little bit what that consists of, what you guys do there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what your objectives are
Yeah,
with
so
individuals.
Sunrise is a private medical detox. It's a pretty big organization. We have 10 detoxes in 5 different states, and I think it was 2018 they opened up here in Massachusetts. I jumped on shortly after they had opened. It's private medical detox. So if you're struggling with alcohol, if you're struggling with opiates, benzodiazepine, even some of these designer drugs that are out there right now, almost anything and everything, right? Our job is to, medically take you off of, those substances that you're
So it's
using.
not like Demic. It's
I mean, it's the same idea. It's the same idea, just done in a different setting. I mean, I love Dimmick with all my heart, but that place was rough, right?
no, definitely. That is definitely.
It was rough. I mean,
But that showed, Demic showed.
love, care, and compassion to me when I needed it the most.
When you needed it
And
the
you
most,
get the
when
same
nobody
thing at
else had
Sunrise.
it.
Right.
And usually people go there when they're at the very end of the road.
Yeah,
Right?
I was a sick kid. You know what I mean? That was my favorite place.
I get it.
So, I mean, Sunrise is a beautiful private medical detox, right? I mean, the staff there is compassionate and caring.
They care.
Yeah, they detox with dignity over there. At least we make it a point to. The facilities, the amenities are beautiful. We are, able to detox off of everything. You're going to come in. It's the most important part because, alcohol withdrawals can kill you. Benzodiazepine withdrawals can kill you. And to do that in an medically, like a non-medical setting,
Dangerous,
it's just dangerous. Not to mention that, like, every time I try to not shoot dope, I ended up shooting dope unless I went into a controlled environment, and then I was able to maybe not shoot dope for 15 minutes before I left. But we're going to work really, really hard and take care of you so you don't want to leave. So that's kind of what we do over there.
And so, you said the insurance. What type of insurance?
So we take almost everything.
Everything.
For the most
part.
part.
But you won't turn nobody away if they really need it.
If the insurance works, we're able to take them. We work with all major insurance providers, some Mass Health, products and stuff like that. So we're still fairly new, and when you open a treatment center, it takes a while, but we're still fairly new. Sunrise has been open 4 years now.
How many beds over there?
We have like 37
so it's
detox
nice,
beds. Yeah, it's a good size. We also brought in another product of ours into Massachusetts called Evolve Recovery Center. That's our CSS on our 3rd floor. That's
Evolve, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
What's that?
So it's residential,
Second
right?
step,
So
right?
yeah, it's a step down from detox.
Okay.
You go into detox, it's fully medical. So you're getting, the nurses, there's the nursing component and stuff like that. And then, as you come off of, whatever substances you're using, the only way we're going to be successful is if we separate from people, places, and things for as long as we can. So, we brought this CSS, which the average length of stay is anywhere from 14 to 30 days. It's kind of where you go up to make sure your post-acute withdrawals kind of subside and you kind of can make it through to the next level of care, which would be partial hospitalization. It's a pretty intense unit. There's a clinical curriculum, group settings, groups, kind of learn about your disease of addiction, kind of learn about triggers and all sorts of different things, and just kind of move through the treatment, giving yourself some time and continuously building up that, length of sobriety. So, when it comes time to go back to work or go back to that family setting or to the stress of life, you have some time under your belt, you have some knowledge under your belt, you're able to combat that disease a little bit more.
And the support system, because I'm sure you guys support
Absolutely.
guys after they leave, if they
absolutely.
need help. They can call you guys, right? There's another thing. This is a beautiful part, right? Again, on your Facebook, your relationship with your daughter is beautiful. The pictures are just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
When I look at the pictures, I was looking at it and I was like, damn, man. Very powerful stuff, man. You know what I mean? Very powerful stuff. What is her name, anyways?
Madison.
Madison. How old is she?
She's 6.
Wow.
She's 6.
Has she ever seen you use?
So do the math.
She's never seen you use?
No, she's never seen me use. No.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah,
so she's never been affected.
Never been affected. That's kind of why.
That's the gift, bro.
It really is.
That's the gift.
She was.
Tell me a little bit about her, because I see in the pictures. I'm sure all your friends know, and everybody that knows you sees that. That's some powerful pictures, bro.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
Listen, like I said, when we put the drugs and the alcohol down, the disease manifests in other ways, right? Again, just like I had no business, working in treatment at 6 months clean, I had no business becoming a father in my first year of recovery, right? But, I'm grateful because, no, my daughter's never seen me use. My daughter gets the overflows of the blessings of me being clean. And not just her, but her mom. And, you know, it's one of my greatest accomplishments, I think, in my recovery is the relationship I have with my daughter's mother.
You can see, well, I think you said your daughter, but you can see that.
Yeah, it's huge, right? Co-parenting, right? As a recovering addict, right? Ego, pride, things like that. But to be able to kind of work through the program of recovery and to apply that to relationships in my life, like co-parenting with my daughter's mother, she's my best friend. You know, she's the real MVP of like where I am today, right? Because like I had a baby in my first year of recovery, right?
Yeah.
Like she's one of the ones that, you know, kept me on track, kept me, you know, involved in my daughter's life, allowed me to work, allowed me to go chase this recovery thing like I was chasing the bag, right? And like my relationship with my daughter is beautiful. Once I learned that like my daughter comes first before anything and everything, including myself, it's, you know, the relationships change, and it's just one of the biggest blessings I have in my life.
It is. Shout out to Madison, hey. Yeah, no, that's kind of dope. That was one thing that stuck out to me. You know, another thing I wanted to talk about, and we can just talk about whatever else you want to talk about, but I seen Justice for Joan.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit? You know, it seems like even with all this traumatic stuff going on, you seem really happy, like legitimately happy. How do you deal with that? And explain first what does that mean, justice for Joan? If you don't mind, explain a little bit.
So like they always told me like when I got clean, things were gonna get better. I'm not a firm believer that life gets better when we get clean. I think we get better at life, right? And we learn some things on how to deal with some stuff, because I can tell you that, you know, not every day in recovery is going to be a good day,
Most
right?
Yeah.
It's better than my days out there using, but hey, it's not gonna be a good day. Along with recovery comes a lot of pain, hurt, and trauma too, right? And in 2018, I think it was my second year in recovery or third year in recovery, I got that call that nobody really wants to get. My mother had died. Okay, right? We go through that through the recovery process. Thank you. We talk about that stuff. What do we do if we lose a parent and stuff like that? But the other side of that phone call was something I never expected to get. You know, my uncle calls me at 10:30 at night to tell me my mother died, but proceeds to tell me that her boyfriend murdered her. And like right then and there, like my whole world shattered. My mom, you know, even from like I talked about, a single mom doing the best she could. My mother was my biggest cheerleader. My mother got a week of me in 2016 down at her house in Florida. She was one of the houses, the doors that were locked and the phone was changed, right? She held her boundaries the best she could, which she was one of the strongest mothers of an addict I could ever imagine. I ever knew, right? When she went, a lot of moms that didn't get her advice and stuff like that, you know, kind of suffered too as well. But anyways, yeah, it was April 13th of 2018. My mom's boyfriend, who also struggled with the disease of addiction, his was alcoholism, decided he was gonna pick up his drug of choice, you know, the natty ice, and he was gonna drink himself. It was his 50th birthday. He was gonna drink himself silly in a sense, right? And my mom had gone to work in the morning and decided she was gonna go check on him on his birthday. So she had left work for her lunch break, and she had come home, and, you know, from what it looks like from the police report, my mother found him drunk, and, you know, they say one of the most dangerous parts of a domestic violence relationship is when the woman or the man tries to leave. And I think my mom tried to leave that day. I think she tried to tell him it was over, and he didn't accept it. He picked up a barbell on the carport of her house, and he caved my mother's head in. I mean, he went in on my mother with rage and aggression at least 15 times, rearranging her face. The first blow killed her, and then he left her under a blanket, and he disappeared. My mom's best friend at the time had come back to the house because they worked together and didn't see my mom come back from lunch, and she was worried about her and found my mother under the blanket. She called the local police and told the local police that you can find Barrick in, you know, the 2 local bars around the corner from the house. So they ended up picking Barrick up, drunk as a skunk, in the local bars, you know, around the corner from where my mother lived in Bradenton, Florida. And he had my mom's brain matter and blood on his hands and pants. They brought him in. There's some police footage from the interrogation room of how drunk he was. And from there, you know, it started off a chain of events that I never thought I'd see in my life. So not only am I dealing with losing my mother, but I'm also losing, you know, myself in the process, because I never thought, you know, people would come up to me, I'm so sorry, I lost my mom too. Well, I didn't lose my mom. My mom was ripped from me, right, by another man's, you know, hands. And it just got crazy. So now I'm involved in this, you know, 18-month capital murder trial, an investigation with the Manatee County Sheriff's Department. I didn't know what to do at that point. You know, the only thing I knew how to do was raise my hand and ask for help, and that's what I did. I raised my hand through that time, and I kind of started advocating for, you know, abusive relationships are wrong. Like, you know, the disease of addiction, alcoholism took my mother, even though she wasn't an alcoholic, but it did. Don't end up like Barrick, because if you get drunk, you might kill somebody, right? Those types of things. And, you know, we went through this murder trial, and it was funny because it was the social media that got the grand jury indictment. When I went out to Florida to kind of settle some of my mom's affairs, I went Facebook Live in the chair that my mother was, you know, her head was caved in from. And that video circulated. He wasn't from that area. He was from a small town in Arizona called Williams. And, you know, that video circulated all through Williams, Arizona, all through Arizona itself. And I started getting messages from prior girlfriends in his life that endured the same abuse and trauma that my mom had gone through. And one of them was his child's mother, Monique. And she had kind of explained her story a little bit. And there was about 5 women that reached out that endured this man's abuse, and kind of painted that prior history of how violent and dangerous he was. And a lot of them, Monique especially, she testified for the grand jury via, obviously, like, you know, virtually. And we were able to establish that pattern. And because of that, if I had never used social media that day, we probably wouldn't have gotten the Capital Murder 1 grand jury indictment. But I can't be more grateful for them women for reaching out and experiencing and like sharing their experience with me, because it brought justice to my mother. At the same time, back here in Massachusetts, as I'm going through this, there was one local domestic violence organization that reached out to me because of some of the substance use work that I've done. I did a lot of work with Corey Finney at the SAFE Project out in Weymouth. And, you know, once, you know, this woman, Laverne Gordon, got wind of my mother's story. She's out of Brockton. She's with the Love Life Now Foundation. She's the founder. Once they got, you know, kind of the overall story of what had happened to my mother, my recovery, they had reached out. And Laverne was just about to do her annual Heal-a-thon, which is a domestic violence walk in Brockton, all through, you know, the city of Brockton. It's like a mile in Brockton that they walk and raise awareness about domestic violence. She had changed her whole plans that year and had done it in my mother's name.
Wow.
So I've got, you know, this whole organization and foundation walking the streets of Brockton with pictures of my mother, you know, advocating that domestic violence is wrong. And it's a heal-a-thon, so I was invited to come out and walk too and speak on my mother's behalf. And a heal-a-thon, what we do every year is the men, to show that abuse is wrong, we wear high heels. So I'll walk a mile in high heels through the city of Brockton, just kind of, you know, walk a mile in their shoes type of situation for my mom. And she's become such a light and such a dark place for me, the Love Life Now Foundation. I'm able to bridge the gap between substance use disorder and domestic violence with my resources with Sunrise and, you know, her resources with domestic violence. And it's just, it's been a beautiful thing. You know, even though there was so much trauma and so much negative with my mom's murder and stuff like that, but there's been so much good. You know, she has, you know, a white ribbon gala coming up, Love Life Now Foundation, in February, where, you know, men pledge to stand up against abuse. I'll be there, and there's a few other gentlemen that come. We all have something in common. We all lost somebody through, you know, domestic violence. And, you know, my mom was my biggest cheerleader. Going through a capital murder trial, having my mother, you know, killed the way that she was killed, having to stay clean through that. Like, it took everything in me to, you know, fight through. A
lot of support too, right?
Getting high. And it really, the most beautiful thing about that process was the recovery community that stepped up. You know, I got support from, you know, families I've done interventions with, you know, loved ones of family members that I've helped that kind of stepped up. You know, my recovery community, my recovery network. I mean, like Maureen Kavanaugh.
I've seen that, yeah.
She adopted me. You know what I mean? She's like my mother at this point. And I would not be where I am if it wasn't for the people on my team. They told me years ago, like, if you want to be successful, you need to surround yourself around successful people. And the people that I have around me today in my life are very successful. And those are the people that show up for me. They hold me accountable. They all did through that time. They all checked on me. And I was able to make it through because I used all the tools that I was taught in treatment, even applied them through this situation with my mom. And it kind of, you know, Sunrise Detox, I was with them at the time. They, you know, were amazing to me. You know what I mean? They let me go out to try. Everybody came together, and I was able to really get through all of that. And there's so much good that comes from it now, you know, and that's really, you know, I think my mother's legacy in a sense. You know, it's unfortunate that Madison never got to meet her grandmother. But at the same time.
When was it, 2018?
2018, my mom lived in Florida.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so we weren't able to really.
Yeah.
But you know, there's a little girl that is never gonna feel her grandmother's love because some man decided to.
Especially the way she loved, from what you said. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that was my mother though. My mother loved me when I couldn't love myself.
Yeah.
You know, my mother could look past my demons and see her little boy, right? And she did the same thing with him. And like I remember, so like that was who my mother was, right? And I remember being in that courtroom. And I know that, like, when I was in that courtroom, there was some issues. I had to have some anger issues in the courtroom and stuff. Got myself in a little bit of trouble. But there were 3 rows of family members, people that my mother had impacted over her time on this earth that were there to support my mother. And then I look over to his side of the courtroom, and there's 0 people there. But I know in my heart that, like, if my mother was here, she would have been on his side.
She'd been on his side,
him. You know what I mean?
That type of woman.
So, so it really... It's hard now, you know. I got abandonment. This is a whole list of stuff that I struggle with, right? That, like, you know, as a man not having his mom, but you know, at the same time, there's so much knowledge and so much self-worth that came from this experience that, like, you know, even in my recovery, I'm stronger. And they talk about in like this recovery community that when your knowledge matches your experience, like, you become a monster. Like, I'm able to navigate things in my life that I never thought I'd be able to navigate, you know, and it's all directly results of the experiences that I've had to go through. So. You know, and if I can take these experiences and I can help somebody else get through them with the experience, because I don't have advice, right? Like, all I have is like my own experience, right? And that's all I try to speak on. But like, if I can help somebody else that's coming through that, you know, there's a network of us out there with murdered parents, right? Like, it's a big thing. And you know, it's the same thing. Like, now if I meet a woman who's self-medicating and drinking too much because, you know, her boyfriend's beating her up, or there's a guy out there whose wife's beating him up and he's drinking too much, like, you know, they can reach out to me and I can get them the help that they need, right? And it's just it's a blessing, you know?
Another understanding, huh?
Yeah.
So, wow, that's kind of deep. And you stayed clean was
it's kind of the hit.
No matter what, those. I mean, that's the name of the game. You know, don't pick up no matter what.
And they tell me that when I first came through.
Remember you hearing that? And you're like, dude,
2000. What do you mean?
What if my girl breaks up with me?
What do you mean? No matter what, like, you know. But it's just as simple as that. It's the simplest but hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. If I don't pick it up, it can't get me high.
Good.
You know. So I just pick up everything else that just gets my life, you know, unmanageable and discontent. You know what I mean?
Shopping, you say shop. I know. Let me ask you another question. Is there anything that your addiction destroyed forever?
Anything my addiction has destroyed forever? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the things that my addiction destroyed needed to be destroyed. I think there were some things internally that my addiction shattered that needed to be shattered. I think that sense of brokenness, you know, all that external stuff comes back. You know, those relationships, as strained as they go, I've seen them come back. I think some of the things that were broken through my disease of addiction were internal. And I feel that they were just rebuilt a lot stronger than they were before.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything about using that you miss? We talked about that, you know what I mean?
You know, I think about it all the time. Like, if I could just go into detox for 5 to 7 days for a vacation, not have any responsibility, not have to take my phone, I mean, just that sense of freedom, right? To not have to worry about, you know, where your kid's gonna eat from. Like, when we were out there using, we flip that switch and we throw everything in the wood chipper. You can't do that today.
No, you can't.
Like, that's a powerful, like, superpower to be able to throw every sense of responsibility into a wood chipper and just run around willy-nilly, not giving a crap about anything. And that sense of freedom is something that I would say I kind of miss. You know what I mean?
Cool. In your life, you know, as of now, you know, there's this new way of life, this new way of being, this new way of thinking. What do you think, how do you think people see you today? Put it that way. How do you think people see you? I mean, you know how you know how they saw you at the end. You know, how do they see you now?
A lot better than they did before.
Yeah.
You know, there's not too many people out there that were around when I was actively using. There's one in particular, you know, and her name's Jess. She's one that used to drag me to meetings and stuff like that. But I kind of base, you know, her vision of me now to the vision back then. But like, everybody has something nice and kind to say. That's different than what I'm used to. You know, as addicts, we struggle with our self-worth. We struggle with, you know, a lot of that, how we view ourselves and stuff. It's hard for us to take compliments and stuff, right? But like, nobody has anything bad to say anymore. And that's one thing I've noticed. You know, I don't hear, you know.
Good thing though, right?
The phone rings, I'm getting invitations into people's homes, you know. So it's an overall good, you know, picture I've painted over the past, preparing myself.
Good. Describe yourself in 3 words.
3 words.
Yeah, just describe yourself. You know, who do you think you are? Or whatever. Just yeah.
I would say hard-headed, perseverance, and empathy.
And the empathy piece.
Yeah.
Good. Another question. How do you make peace with some of the material life brought into your life? How do you make peace with it? You know, your mom's passing. I don't want to say death, but you know, your mom's passing. Just stuff that you lost, the years that you. How do you make peace with that? I mean, on a daily basis, how do you get up and that does not consume you to a place where you are immobilized, where you can't do nothing, or you go backwards?
I learned a long time ago in this recovery process that, like, it's what I put into it, right? So anything that I lost in addiction, I wasn't meant to have anyways. And that if I put my mind to it, I can go out and get more and better and bigger things clean than I ever could have, you know, getting high.
Yeah. But how do you make peace with it? What I mean is, you know how we have all this trauma, right? We have all this trauma in us, and just because we get clean, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't like it diminishes it, but it doesn't get rid of the trauma. How do you deal with that? How do you still move forward with, we still have all that stuff on with you?
So for me, it's talking about it. It's half the reason I raise my hand. It's half the reason I'm here sitting on your show. It's half the reason I go around, I talk about my disease, I put my business out there. It's the more I talk about it, the less power I give it to consume me. Because all those days that I wasn't talking about my trauma, that I wasn't talking about the things that I was struggling with, when I was suppressing things, I imploded. And my implosion, you know, usually I was locked in a Connell Lodge smoking crack like a broken chimney, right? Like that's what I do, right? So like if I'm out there talking about it, if I'm out there, you know, addressing it, if I'm working on it, and I give it less power. The more I suppress it, and not talk about it, the more it eats at me, and the more risk I am to handling things the way I used to. So, you know, that's kind of what I do.
Good, thank you. Another question is, how has your recovery affected your fatherhood? Being a father, how's it, you know, there's guys out there that never think they'll get their kids back, never think, even if you do, is some like me who've, you know, had a daughter who, through all my whole life.
I struggle as a father, right? Like I'm constantly fiending for my daughter's love, right? I'm constantly overcompensating. You know, if she wants something, I got to get her the biggest thing in the world. Like I struggle with all that. I think that there wouldn't be any fatherhood if I didn't have my recovery. And I also think at the same time, the first thing I put in front of my recovery is the second thing I'm going to lose. So I need to make sure my recovery is intact to continue to be that little girl's father. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how to answer that. My recovery is the reason why I am a dad. Do you know what I mean? Because I mean, again, throw it all in the wood chipper. Like that goes in there too, you know, and then I'm running around the city, you know.
Let me ask you, you know, us as men, why do you think it's tough for us to talk about deep stuff, the real stuff, you know, like what you exposed a little while ago, and I said, me too. Why do you think that's tough? Why, even in being in recovery and being clean and going to meetings where we're talking about, you know, that stuff, that internal stuff.
I think it's the same reason why I didn't want to talk about getting high. Well, my mom didn't want to talk about that her boyfriend was beating the crap out of her, right? It's in shame, where it's very shameful stuff to talk about. You know, there's a lot of guilt for, you know, stuff like that we may have allowed to happen, or we put ourselves in the positions and situations that it did happen. A lot of it has to do with our self-worth. I think that the stigma of men talking about stuff like that too, of how people are gonna view us and stuff like that, kind of skews our, you know, ability to, you know, talk about it, right? But I can tell you that, like, my inability to accept personal responsibility kept me sick for years. So like, my inability to, kind of share on those subjects, I'm not going to allow to take me back out or continue to feel ashamed or, embarrassed and kind of carry those things with me, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think.
Thank you. Yeah. A couple more questions. Is it getting better out there? What I mean is, we talked about a little bit. I know there's resources, right? But like I said, I think I read somewhere where last year was the highest amounts of overdoses, with from all the years. So and when I look at that, it's like things getting better. We talked about the medical assisted treatment, all that. Is it getting better out there?
I think so.
I think so. We're doing. We are doing something.
I think so. I do a lot of traveling, especially with Sunrise and all the locations that we have in all the different states. And I can tell you that Massachusetts, whether you have good insurance, you have bad insurance, you don't have insurance at all, it's a flagship state for substance use disorder treatment. There are more beds available out here than there are in a lot of states. There are more resources, nonprofits, not just for the addict, but for the addict's mom or dad, for the children of addicts. I mean, we're losing a generation by the wayside with the overdose rates, but what about the generation we're leaving behind, right? There are resources for those kids. There's a lot more going on than there ever has been. I feel like, every couple months there's a new resource for a different avenue that not many people would have thought about. We're never going to have enough beds. It's one of those things that we're not going to have that, but we're a lot better than what we were, 10 years ago. There are a lot of good people out there fighting for so many different resources. You look at, Mass Ave, what it was 8 years ago to what it is now. Like, there's more resources, more boots on the ground, more people out there in the community giving back, trying to connect people with the resources that are going to, be appropriate to help them.
Yeah, but is the drug, do you think it's like a different drug? That's why it's hot? I mean, people maybe not, like you said, people are not looking for or not accepting the resources. Do you think it's because of the nature of the drug that's out there now that it's not allowing people to, like, what I mean? What I mean is, if we have all these resources, why aren't more addicts taking these resources?
I mean, how do we know that we don't? We hear about the horrible stuff. We hear about the overdoses. We hear about,
we don't hear nothing about nothing
we
good,
don't
right?
hear about the people going out. That's why it's more important for people like yourself, myself, people with 30 days clean to stand up and talk about having 30 days clean. It's important for the parents to stand up and say we got our kids back, right? It's more important for people who are hitting a year or 24 hours to kind of talk about, the good stuff that's happening out here in our communities, because, I mean, we're only going to hear about the bad things. That's where all the emphasis is going to be on. I mean, I know for me, I hear more about, people dying than I do about people getting their kids back or people buying houses in recovery and stuff like that. So I feel like if we focus more on, some of the good stuff.
Change the narrative, right?
Right, and that's the hit. I mean, I'm a firm believer, like I said to you before, that, this process of recovery, clean time starts when I have, the thought that I want to increase the quality of my life. And like every pathway now, like before years ago when I got clean, there was 1 or 2 ways to do this thing, right? There's so many different ways, and it makes sense because it's not a cookie cutter process. It's not one size fits all, right? Like, I want to increase the quality of my life, like from whatever it is, and not just with drugs or anything like that. It's just about putting one foot in front of the other and going out there and being the best version of you possibly can be at whatever that means. You know what I mean? And it's like, the more we show people actually, getting better, we see the success, we see what's working, and we put, some attention to that, it's going to combat some of the negative stuff we see. I mean, we have more resources now than we ever have. It's a lot easier for someone to get in treatment these days than it was. I could name off 15, 20 people out there doing some amazing, better work than I could ever do. And, they're only a phone call away. I'm only a phone call away. with social media and these bed listings that someone takes the time every day to make and post on Facebook, you know, kind of gives that mom who doesn't know what to do kind of a direction to look in, right? I mean, I look at Mass Ave, there are different Facebook groups out there that are helping people find their loved ones on Mass Ave. There was no Facebook group 10 years ago when I was out there smoking
Looking
crack
for you, right?
dumpster, right? Like, I didn't want to be found. You know what I mean? Like there was nobody, there were no network of good-hearted individuals doing these things back then, right? And like for me to look at what it was, you know, 7, 8 years ago to what it is now, it's a completely different landscape. It's a completely different, I mean, the streets, it's all the same. It's never going to change. But if we keep continuously looking at the good things and seeing some of these success stories and watching, you know, not just our overdose rates go up, but like how many, you know, addicts that went from treatment have housing now? And give me those statistics. You know, I kind of want to see what those look like. Or how many people that checked into a rehab last year, you know, are clean today? Like, how do we find those statistics? We have nothing to combat. It's really the only thing we have, right? I mean, Narcan by itself wasn't around it wasn't as widely available, you know, back then as it is.
It's
now.
everywhere now. You can go, you can get it for free too, right?
Yeah.
You have to pay for it. All right, let me. Do you have anything else that you would like to say?
No, we hit a lot of stuff, man.
We did. Well, I'm happy. I'm happy.
I mean,
but I do need for you to. That's your camera right there. What I would like for you to do there, it might be a mom that's struggling that don't know what to do, or it might be a person that sees this and is struggling and don't think there's hope. Take your time. Take as long as you need. And I would like for you to just, you know, give a message of hope or to someone there. And there's your camera.
All right. I guess for me, if you're out there struggling, there is a better way of life. If you're a family member of somebody struggling, there's always someone to call. Finding these resources aren't easy, but they're everywhere. I feel like, I know for me, I stayed silent for a long time, too scared to raise my hand and ask for help. I kept myself sick with my inability to put myself out there and be vulnerable with people who were struggling just like me or have had struggled. It takes a lot for me to understand that like I wasn't the only one and that there were other people a lot further along in this process than I was that was willing to swoop in and get me the help that I needed. I know just like my mom as the mother of an addict, there are other moms, you know, that kind of have built these network of parents, of people in recovery that are out there to help. The resources are there. I mean, my phone number, you can post it on the screen. People can call. I'm more than happy to plug anybody in with the resources that they need and point them in the right direction. I just know that just like my mom, she stayed silent and it didn't work out for her, you know. Whatever I can do to help, I'm here. I mean, that's what I do. That's what it's always been. So that'd be my message is.
I appreciate you very much, man. I appreciate you coming through. I give a shout out to Sunrise Detox. What was the other thing? The Evolve
Recovery Center.
Evolve Recovery Center. Everybody that's out there is doing the work like Rob's doing. Congratulations on the 6 years. Keep it going. Anytime you need a platform, you can hit me up, send people through. I like what you said, change the narrative. So if you have people that want to come in and help me change the narrative, I'm willing to do that. You're right. Maybe that's what it is. We're just listening to all the people that are dying and not all the people that are living.
Yeah,
I think that might be more powerful. That was pretty powerful right there. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I know I can be found on Facebook. You know, Rob Demeo. If you're struggling or in an abusive relationship, an unsafe situation, Love Life Now Foundation, you can look them up too as well. The resources are out there. I just want to make sure anybody has access to reach me or to reach these resources.
What we can do is after when we're done, we'll put up anything that you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end, that'll be on the end, so you can find all that information out at the end. I do have another question. You were in a fashion show. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about the fashion show. Sorry, people.
So again, going back to the Love Life Now Foundation and the amazing founder, Laverne Gordon, every year the Love Life Now Foundation puts together an empowerment fashion show. Okay. I think I've modeled in that show 4 years or 3 years, something like that. COVID screws me up with time trying to remember stuff, right? Some stuff was virtual, some stuff was in person, but it was one of these things. I was completely, again, you know, I was uncomfortable, I was insecure, I was fearful and doubtful, and I said yes because I learned in my recovery that I don't very rarely say no, right? The fashion show is where a group of survivors come together. It's a gala setup. We raise money for the Love Life Now Foundation to continue to help those in need that are struggling in domestic violence situations. But the fashion show is really cool because the models in the fashion show are survivors with amazing stories. You know, I've been rocking with the Love Life Now Foundation for a few years, since the first year my mother got murdered back in 2018, and I've built this family of survivors, right, or thrivers, I mean,
better name, thrivers.
Yeah, so it's amazing because I remember the first year I did it, there were a couple other survivors, female survivors, that decided they were going to do this show too, that were asked to model in the show, and you know, we all put on fancy clothes and we walk a catwalk, and it's awkward and it's weird. Especially for a guy, but I'm so grateful to be, you know, one of the male models in the show, because domestic violence impacted my life in so many different ways, right? I mean, one of the biggest things, I think the domestic violence has shown me more how to be a father to a little girl than my recovery ever will, right? Because like that, I'm that little girl, you know what I mean? That little girl's self-worth depends upon how I treat her, right? And it's huge, right? And so we get these survivor women that, you know, it's their first time, and I didn't understand what I was getting myself into when Laverne asked me to do it my first year, but it was really beautiful because there were these women who were nervous, insecure, fearful, and doubtful, you know, have gone through so much trauma, have endured so much abuse, and have escaped some seriously dangerous situations. And you know, the first walk out is always the first awkward one.
Yeah,
you'd go
so
out, right? Yeah, so you'd go out and then you'd come back, you'd change and go out again. And I'd watch these women walk out very, very tight and very not sure what's going to happen. And you know, the crowd's there for them. They're clapping. They're empowering these survivors, myself included. And you feel that love. You get that sense of, you know, empowerment. And by the second walk they come through, the next time they're dancing, walking down. They're fully empowered. They're surviving. They're thriving, and it's showing, and they're glowing. And it's a beautiful thing because you know, I walk when I'm asked to walk because, you know, I'm just so grateful that those women are able to walk and didn't end up like my mom, right? So, and I feel like my mom's story is important because, you know, she couldn't get away. She couldn't walk away from that situation like some other women are able to do that. And it's just a beautiful thing overall. So, you know, it's great. It's a great night out. It's a fancy night out. You know, we raise some money. We get to wear some cool clothes, get some great pictures, have some good laughs, and you know, in a sense, fellowship too, right? Survivors, people who understand, you know, and just kind of be there for each other. And it's a beautiful thing. I'll have to plug in with Laverne too.
Let it come through. I mean, that sounds like a good, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody I would definitely enjoy talking to. Again, thank you for coming through. Congratulations on the 6 years. I'd like to say, again, a shout out to Leaving Street Ministries. Shout out to Yard Time Entertainment. I also want to talk about the Recovery Connection real quick. There's a Recovery Connection here at 31 Main Street in Marlboro. You guys can come down. It's not only for people in recovery. If you have a skill, if you want to just drop in and see what we're doing down there, please come down to the Recovery Connection. Also, I like to talk about the coat drive and clothes drive that we're having. If you have any clothes or warm clothes to help keep people warm, please drop them off at 31 Main Street at the Recovery Connection. We'll appreciate it. Thank you for showing up. Share the video and subscribe. And always, I like to say, I love you to Taisha, Darryl, and Zayla. Peace.